Alright, so we're going to take a look at the quadratic formula today. And we're going to use the quadratic formula when we can't factor out the equation the way we want to be able to solve it. So it's kind of like our backup plan for solving a quadratic equation when we can't use factoring. So anyways, to show you how it works. When we go to factor one of these out, okay, so we're going to solve this one by factoring. We set the equation to 0. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 15 both sides here, so I make my equation equal to 0. And now I'm going to find the numbers that multiply to 15 and add to 2. So I'll start my factoring here. Still making the equation that equals 0, except we're going to write it in factors here, so we can see our solutions nice. So here I'm going to get two numbers that multiply to 15. Okay, a negative 15, and add up to plus 2. And I guess if I use 3 and 5 here, if I use 3 negative 3x and 5x, that would work okay. So that means that when I factor this out, I'm going to get x minus 3 and x plus 5. Okay? And the reason that we want to factor like we did before is that we can see our solutions really simply now. I say if I can make one of the two factors 0, that means that this whole equation is going to equal 0, and that's my solution. So it looks like x from this first factor could equal 3. That would make this piece 0. So if this 0 is times whatever this is, that's going to equal 0. And it looks like if I put minus 5 in here, that's going to make this factor 0, so the whole thing's 0, and I've got my two solutions. All right? But the question is, what happens if it's not so nifty to factor out? Okay? We need an alternative method. So the quadratic formula provides that for us. So we start out one of these. Here's the quadratic formula, and this is called the standard form of an equation. Okay, I've set the equation to 0, and that's my standard form, and I've got an x squared, an x, and then a constant term equals 0. Okay, and here's my quadratic formula. You guys are going to want to memorize this, know it like the back of your hand. So x, my solutions, okay, are going to equal minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Right? So this is the same equation, but let's say that I don't have any idea on how to factor. I'm completely mystified as to how to factor this out and solve for an equation. So I'm going to use my quadratic formula instead. So it looks like it's already in standard form here for me. I've got x squared, an x term, and then a constant term which equals 0. So I'm just going to list my a, b, and c. So it looks like my a is in front of my x squared here, and it's 1. Okay, my b is the number in front of my x term, and it's plus 2. And c, my constant, is minus 15. Now it's really important that you write down the sign of your number, of the corresponding number. Okay, don't just write 15 here, so you're going to get the wrong answer. Okay, so let's dump that into our formula. So we want to find x, so x is equal to, so minus b is going to be minus 2 plus or minus, we'll talk about the plus or minus in a second here and explain that a little better, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 2 squared minus 4 times a, 1, times c, which is minus 15. Okay, and that's all going to be over 2a. So 2 times, looks like 1. Okay, and so now we've got this big mess here, and we just want to simplify it. So we have to remember our order of operations. We want to do what's inside any of the grouping symbols first, okay, and then we want to take care of this grouping symbol, the top of the divided sign, and then finally divide by 2. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so x is equal to, we'll just keep that minus 2 there, plus or minus, and now the inside of my square root sign, 2 squared is going to give me 4, and now I'm going to multiply these three numbers and get something out of that. So it looks like I'm going to get negative 4 times 1 times negative 15 is going to give me plus 60. Okay, and that's all going to be divided by 2, right? So let's continue to simplify here. This looks kind of nice here because this gives me 64, and the square root of 64 I know is 8. So I'm going to write x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 8 all over 2. Okay, so we're getting a simpler version of what we started with here. It's starting to make a little bit more sense. But what we really want is we want our two magic solutions. Okay, what we're looking for is this x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 5. So that's when we see this plus minus sign here, okay, that's telling us that we're going to have two solutions, right? So I'm just going to continue this up here. Okay, so now I just do the top with the plus sign. Minus 2 plus 8 gives me 6, all divided by 2, so x is equal to, so let's do that again. Negative 2 plus 8 is plus 6 divided by 2. So right now I'm doing the plus side of the equation, and looky here, that gives me 3, just like we wanted. Okay, and the other side, x is also equal to negative 2 minus 8. So now I go do the other one separately. Negative 2 minus 8 gives me minus 10 divided by 2 gives me minus 5. So you can see that our quadratic formula works. Okay, we factored it up here to get our x equals 3 and x equals minus 5, and we use the quadratic formula here to get the same exact thing. Okay, so under here, how do our answers to problems 1 and 2 compare? Of course, they have to be the same. They are the same because we started with the same equation. Okay, it has to be the same answers to the same equation. Okay, so let's try something different. Okay, let's go look at this one now. Okay, so this one's a little hairier, and let's say I don't really like factoring, and I say I'm going straight to the quadratic formula here. Okay, so I'm going to use the quadratic formula to solve for this. So I'm going to look for my pieces first. So remember, okay, a is the number in front of the x squared, and in this case it's minus 2. Really important that you remember the sign. Okay, my b is minus 4, and my c is plus 3. Okay, so let's start rolling through this. So x is equal to minus b, so minus minus 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so minus 4 all squared, minus 4 times a, negative 2 times c, which is 3. And that is all over 2 times a, 2 times negative 2. Okay, so that, again, it looks like a bit of a mess, but let's start simplifying here and we'll find our answer. So this is just negative 4 times negative 4 just gives me, or sorry, negative times negative 4 just gives me plus 4, plus or minus. And now what's under the root sign here, looks like I'm going to get 16 here. And now, these three numbers I'm going to multiply together to see what I'm going to add or subtract to 16. So minus 4 times minus 2 gives me plus 8, times 3 gives me plus 24. So that looks good there. And on the bottom, I'm going to get negative 4. Okay. So here I'm going to simplify what's in here. And here it's going to look a little uglier because I can't really. So here I've got 4 plus or minus the square root of 40. Now no perfect square goes, sorry, the square root of 40 isn't a perfect square. Okay, so here this means that this is the value of the quadratic formula, is because if you tried to factor this one out, okay, it would give us a prime. It's something that we can't factor out with whole numbers. All right, so here I can actually get my answer, my two solutions, with an x. So all we're really left to do here is to kind of clean this, up so that so that it looks a little prettier. Okay, so what you got to ask yourself, we're going to start cleaning it up with this square root of 40. You got to ask yourself, start this up over here again, and say what numbers multiply to 40, and what I'm trying to look for is one that has a perfect square in it. So if I go 4 times 10, I can see that 4 is a perfect square. Okay, so the square root of 4, I can take that perfect square out. All right, the square root of 10 is going to stay underneath, but I can rewrite this as x is equal to 4 plus or minus. Now the square root of 4 is 2, can come on the outside of my square root sign, and I'm left with square root of 10 there. And that's all over negative 4. Okay, and now it's just like the division that we did in the last unit. Okay, this minus 4 is left with is the denominator for both of these terms. So it looks like 4 minus 4 is going to give me, so x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus, okay, and this part, 2 divided by negative 4, is going to give me 1/2 roots of 10. Okay, and we could work this out in the calculator and see what our two answers are as a decimal, and that'll be good. That's it. Sorry about that. That was just Oscar popping in to say hi, but I was done anyway. So what I want you guys to do, what I was saying is that now you can just go into your calculator and break it down and find the decimal. So negative 1 plus 1/2 times square root of 10, find out what that decimal is. And same with negative 1 minus 1/2 square roots of 10. Find out what that decimal is. And it's your two x's in decimal form that would solve this equation that we would never be able to do if we factored it out. Okay? So what I'd like you to do, oh, there's the bell. Must be break time. Okay, so we're done. What I'd like you to do is go and try these next two examples here, 4 and 5, and try and get it into this form. Okay, try and find the two solutions. All right, and then check and see if inside there's any perfect square there, and yeah, you'll be set up for next class. Where you go.